Hello, America. This is actually the Mark Schaftlein report. And Mark had some personal business to take care of today. And so since it was the day before Christmas Eve, he asked a Jew to host it. So I am your host today, and I got a very special guest. You know, one of the really cool things about becoming a blogger a long time ago when I had hair was that I got to really sometimes influence what's happening out in the country and you know, getting people hired and fired. But the best thing is that I got to meet and become dear friends with the second best blogger on the internet next to me. Okay, my dear friend, Ed Morrissey, who's the senior editor of Hot Air, which if you don't read, you should every morning, because that's what I do. But that's because his wife, Marcia, pays me. But no, you really should read it. It's wonderful. And Ed, did you ever read this book?
You know, I think I read that once or twice. And by the way, now I understand where the money's going every month. I didn't realize that Mark was going to the blog.
You see? Now, Ed
what's going on?
He just did a huge screw up, because for those of you looking for a white Christmas, Ed moved over the summer and he used to live in Minnesota. Minnesota's going to have a white Christmas.
Yes, they are.
And he doesn't have to shovel.
I've had 24 of them. That was enough. I am happy to be down here in Central Texas, where the weather is expected on Christmas Day to be 84 degrees.
That is wonderful.
Oh, it's great. I'm looking forward to it.
And to everybody listening or watching, please have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. It's been kind of tough, but you know, as I usually end each show, this is still the best country in the world, and we're going to get through this.
Yep.
Now, I want to start by asking you about, there was a New York Times story, today, that said Kamala Harris is not doing a great job. Now, we know she hasn't read the article yet because she's probably working hard on the border crisis. But what do you think of the Times article?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's interesting that the New York Times is doing this. You know, this is the type of, I would have expected this more from, you know, center-right publications. The New York Times, definitely a center-left publication. And I think at its most conservative, it's center-left. Otherwise, it's full-on progressive. And Kamala Harris is really the progressive project for 2024 and 2028. And so I was sort of expecting this to be more focused on the critics of Kamala Harris when I first was looking at this. So I was, you know, scanning it at first going, well, here we go. The critics are misogynistic. The critics are racist, blah, 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 blah. And there's a little bit of that that's kind of introduced, but it's coming from Harris's allies. And the piece itself is actually, I think, remarkably level-headed. And it points out that even members of the Democratic Party are looking at this as a real problem. Henry Cuellar is a Democratic representative from Texas who's a moderate, and he's actually a little bit harder line on the border than most of his fellow Democrats. He's been trying to get the Biden administration to stop talking about how they're going to be friendlier to migrants because it's creating huge problems down here in Texas. And he's tried to work with Kamala Harris, and she doesn't return his phone calls. And he finally says, you know, I don't even bother with her. She's not interested in this topic, even though it's supposed to be, you know, her portfolio now. It has been since March. He says, I just go to the West Wing because at least they answer the phones. And that's not the only internal.
But Kamala Harris says that it's all because she's white. She's not white or a man, right?
Yeah, you know, and I wrote about it today, right? Because this is not a new criticism. This has been going on at least since that disastrous Lester Holt interview, and that was in June. I mean, they've kept her away from major interviews for the most part. They've part of the story here is that Harris is complaining that Biden's not involving her more. He had to meet with Joe Manchin, and he asked her to leave the meeting before it started, and that's sort of the jump off point here for the New York Times article today. I didn't talk about this in the Post, but the reason why Biden, I mean, people are saying, well, they're not engaging her properly, they're not using her properly. Well, part of the reason why Biden asked her to step out, and the New York Times does cover this, is because Harris pissed off Manchin by campaigning against a position that he held in West Virginia without even giving him a heads up that she was going to show up out there. And so while Manchin is, Manchin's, I think, pretty polite, courtly kind of guy, sort of like John Kennedy would be on the other side of the aisle. He understands, maybe even more so than John Kennedy, frankly. Maybe Bill Cassidy is a better way of doing it, or James Inhofe would be a great example of this.
Right.
Even though he completely opposes what you're doing, he understands the protocol, the rhetoric, the respect that you give other members of your chamber. So I don't think Manchin, he's old school. I think Manchin's old school on that point as well. But clearly, leaving her in that meeting was not going to help matters with Manchin.
Right.
Joe Biden knows Manchin. He's known Manchin longer and felt that he could, leverage his own relationship with Manchin. In the end, it turned out that he couldn't, but including Harris in that meeting would have been dumb. And her allies are fuming over this without acknowledging the fact that she screwed up in the first place.
Wait, she has allies left in her office? I thought everyone quit.
No, these are the newly hired allies.
But I like Josh Krasheimer's response to her saying that no other VP was treated like her. And he said, right, paging Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle. I mean, even if you're going to say, well, we're talking about how people treat women, all the people who tweeted out today all three of them that tweeted out that I was a misogynist for criticizing Kamala Harris, I would really like to see what their social media feeds looked like when Sarah Palin was running for vice president.
Yeah,
I would like to know what their social media feeds looked like when Nikki Haley was flirting with the run for the presidency. I would love to see those types of or Joni Ernst when she was running for the Senate, either time that she ran for the Senate. You can if you're going to run for office, if you're going to hold public office, you better be prepared to be criticized for whatever failings that you have in your performance. That isn't misogyny. That's called accountability. And it's just ridiculous. And what's interesting about this New York Times article, Jeff, is that it sort of presages all this, because they sort of talk about how, her allies claim that she's being held to a double standard, like you just said. And then they say, but this is what's really going on. So if people have a problem with me linking to the New York Times and basically agreeing with their message, they may want to take it up with the New York Times.
Well, yeah, but like you said, really the message wasn't she sucks. The message was, this is what we hear.
Well, the message is that it's clearly not working even for people within the Democratic Party establishment. It's not working. She's not working as Joe Biden's running mate. And the reason why this matters is, people are also saying, well, describe the job of vice president. Well, there is no job of vice president, except to the extent that the president defines it. The issue, though, for Democrats is the reason why they wanted Harris in that position was so that progressives could have a leg up on the next time that there was a presidential opening. That was their guarantee that progressives were going to have an entree to the White House, to the Oval Office, and that they'd have a progressive nominee the next time out, as opposed to Biden, who's turning out to be a progressive,
But if you look at it, Pence was a big part of Trump's administration. And even Biden, when he was part of the Obama meeting, he was a big effing deal.
No, he wasn't, actually.
He wasn't?
No, Obama tried to make him into one to basically bolster his. This is part of what I was talking about, is that you have to start off with the fact that Joe Biden was an incompetent as vice president. Joe Biden only really had one portfolio when Obama picked him, which was the foreign policy portfolio. For some reason, I don't
Well,
know
because
where
he
it
was
got.
chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee in the
Yeah,
Senate.
but as Robert Gates said, he was consistently wrong on every foreign policy issue for 40 years. And he was consistently wrong on it during the Obama administration, too. Do you remember the big assignment that Biden gave Harris the border crisis as an assignment to deal with, right? Do you remember what Joe Biden's big assignment was the first term of Barack Obama's presidency?
Porculus?
Porculus.
Right.
He was supposed to ensure that there was no fraud in Porculus and that it executed properly. There was plenty of fraud in Porculus. I mean, they had all sorts of fraud and mismanagement.
Guys, Porculus is the nickname for the first big stimulus package that was passed in the first year.
In the first month.
Right.
It was passed in the first month of the Obama presidency. This is during that economic crisis. And and Joe's, Sheriff Joe was supposed to be the guy that was going to guarantee that it was handled properly. And it wasn't. It was mismanaged. It was poorly conceived anyway by Congress and the administration. So it was destined to fail. I mean, this is the cash for clunkers thing. This is the Solyndra green energy stuff that was an utter failure. The whole thing, soup to nuts, was a flop. All it did was move demand up. It was going to exist anyway.
Right.
Which is the reason why it ended up delaying and somewhat retarding the economic growth that should have happened almost immediately as soon as the financial industry was able to steady itself. And most of that effort, some of that came during the Obama administration. Most of that had already taken place before Obama took office with the emergency actions in Congress and the last gasp of the Bush administration.
But on the other hand, Biden really did a good job with Ukraine, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ukraine is a mess for reasons other than Biden. I mean,
still a mess.
And it's still a mess. It's still a mess. It's been a mess since 2014. I mean, you could lay that one on Obama. The problem with Ukraine, I mean, this is a whole other, policy area. But the problem is that NATO and the EU got too aggressive in trying to extend its reach to the very borders of Russia. They made that mistake in Georgia in 2007 and 2008, and paid the price for it. They didn't learn from that. Did it again in Ukraine, and in 2014, the Russians reacted the exact same way they had reacted to it in Georgia. Russia is, especially Vladimir Putin, is not going to tolerate interference on states that are on his border.
Right. Let me ask you something else. You mentioned Manchin before. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, President Biden said that Manchin told him that it was Manchin's fault for the misunderstanding, and about 5 minutes later, the White House said, no, that was a misstatement, or that's not really what he meant. So whose fault was it?
Well, that was definitely Manchin's fault, right? I mean, I'm sorry, Biden's fault. I mean, I don't even understand why you say something like that, other than the fact that Joe Biden is basically well, no, I mean, this is a guy who would tell a lie 5 times, even when the truth would benefit him once. He makes stuff up. He makes stuff up constantly. And this is not an age-related thing. This has always been Joe Biden. He's dishonest. He
had the nickname Lion Joe Biden before he ran for president.
Well, I mean, he's a serial plagiarist.
Right.
That came out in 1987. He was a plagiarist in law school too, which came out a little bit after that. This is a guy who just makes stuff up about his own background in order to, for self-promotion. And so, yeah, I mean, faced with a failure, who's he going to blame? He's not going to turn around and say, well, this is really on me. Maybe we overshot the mark on this thing. We got to go back to the drawing board, and I'm going to have to learn to be a little bit more humble about expectations in a 50-50 Senate. No, he accused Joe Manchin of admitting to misleading him when Manchin's been very consistent on these points all along. I mean, it's
been no secret. Manchin said, I need this. And he still says, I need the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what Manchin wants. This is what Manchin has always wanted. He wants a reconciliation bill that's under $2 trillion, preferably under $1.75 trillion in total honest 10-year cost, with revenue enhancements that pay for the new spending. And he doesn't want to do massive social engineering in it. He wants it targeted as, economic aid targeted at the working class.
That's right.
That's what he wants. And that's what he's always wanted. Did you read Charles Lane's column? I think it was 2 days ago or yesterday at the Washington Post. You really should read it because Charles Lane's a good writer anyway. Right. I like Charles Lane. And you really should read it because if I could pull it up here, I did link to it. So let me see if I can pull it up here. But basically he's saying the issue here isn't why Joe Manchin didn't vote for, reconciliation. The issue is why Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer thought any senator from West Virginia, Republican or Democrat, would ever vote for this bill. Ever.
Well, even the Green New Deal stuff, West Virginia is an energy producing state.
Yeah. And that's
why would you go for something that limits the production of energy?
Yeah, that's part of what Lane had to say too. I mean, here I'll just quote from it really quickly. There would have to have been a lot in BBB for his home state to overcome Manchin's ostensible concern about inflation and such. There's not. To the contrary, it's hard to imagine a bill that would have been more difficult for any senator from West Virginia, Democrat or Republican, to support. It says, and at times Manchin's motivations for resisting BBB have been portrayed as a mystery. The real mystery is why the White House and Senate Majority Leader Charles E. Schumer bet their political future on getting Manchin to vote for a bill such as this one, which is what I've been saying for months too, is that did they even talk to the guy first before crafting this thing? No. They thought they could badger him. Yeah, they thought they could badger him into it.
Let me ask you something though. Do you think AOC is going to get pissed off when there are bad kids and Santa puts coal in their stockings?
Well, I think the coal's already in the stockings. You look at the polls. Take a look at how many people are leaving Congress, right? You got, 23, 24 retirements among House Democrats already. And we're going to see it, I think, several more before the window closes on that around February 1st.
Same thing happened in 2018 with the Republicans.
Right, because they saw that they weren't going to be in the majority any longer. And it's no fun being in the House minority. You don't have any leverage at all, period. And so they're getting out while the getting is good, basically. They're not going to put themselves.
Do you think Manchin's going to switch parties?
The reason why I linked to the Charles Lane column is, for one thing, it's really good, so I want to get more people to see it. But the other reason is that Punchbowl reported this morning that progressive groups have spent $10 million targeting Manchin over the past several months,
right?
Over not just BBB, although that was a big part of it, but also over the voting, their election federalization bill, SB1. They spent more money on that, actually. The filibusters part of that. A couple other things, child tax credits are in there too, but most of the money, or at least half the money, has been on SB1. And while they're spending $10 million in West Virginia going after a guy, the only Democrat who could possibly hold that seat in deep, deep red West Virginia, they're busy losing Virginia next door. All of the statewide races. They lost all the statewide races in Virginia, which is blue, while they're attacking Joe Manchin, the only Democrat who could possibly win a statewide election now in West Virginia. If I'm Joe Manchin and I'm looking at progressive groups backed by Kamala Harris, backed by Bernie Sanders, backed by Chuck Schumer, and AOC, of course, obviously, spending $10 million against me in my home state, ostensibly people from the same party that I represent, when I'm giving them the Senate majority, or at least Senate control, I'd be looking at that and going, I don't know how much longer I need to hang out with this bunch of ingrates. Now, I will say this. Joe Manchin has, I think, a deep personal investment in his partisan identification, right? I mean, it's really the only thing that explains this. Selena Zito's interviewed him a few times, and I think it really comes across is that he just really sees himself as a Democrat.
Folks, Selena Zito is another person that you should read if you don't read her.
Absolutely. So you can go to selenazito.com, by the way, and sign up for her newsletters. They're great. So I think that there's a deep personal commitment to that political identity that he's carved out as a moderate, independent Democrat who can work across the aisle with everybody. And to flip parties would be to really cut that investment loose. So I understand why he'd be reluctant to do it, but at this point, I think you're almost approaching a sunk cost fallacy, or he is on that score. It's clear that this is not this is not a Democratic Party that's going to value him. It's not a Democratic Party that's going to support him. In fact, it's a Democratic Party whose activists are actively attacking you in your own home state, where you probably can't win another election under the Democratic banner anyway. So why stick around unless you want to retire in 2024, which maybe he does. Maybe he wants to retire as a Democrat. I could understand that. I can respect it. I'm not a big fan of party switchers. I mean, we all remember Jim Jeffords. But you got to remember that Jumpin' Jim Jeffords was in a state that was much less at the time was much less a one-party state than Joe Manchin is right now. I mean,
but so, yeah. I got to tell you, I got to think that if he believes the Republicans are going to take the Senate, I think it's better for him as a Democrat who can negotiate with the other side than being another Republican in the Senate.
Well, you know, that's the thing too. I mean, once you flip, I mean, you kind of give it away, right? I mean, you kind of give away
both sides will hate him.
Well, I don't know if Republicans will hate him. And frankly, I think that Republicans are much more ready to embrace him than Democrats were to embrace Jeffords back in, what was it, 2001. Mm-hmm. And I think Manchin lines up better with Republicans these days. You know, however, I think he probably does have to keep in mind how some of his friends are perceived by Republicans. And when I say his friends, I'm talking about Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney, all three of whom he's, you know, on pretty good terms with. Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, maybe he's looking at that and going, yeah, I mean, they'd love me for a day. They'd love me for a day. And then, I don't know.
I got to be honest. I put Romney in a totally different category than Collins and the one from Alaska, Murkowski.
Murkowski, yeah.
There's something about him I don't like.
You know, it's funny because I actually, you know, I've gotten a chance to talk to Mitt Romney twice, I think it is. And I actually am impressed by the guy, and I like the guy. And I think on a personal basis, he's a good guy. And I think also he would have made a good president. He just didn't make a terribly great presidential candidate. He could have won that election in 2012 had he comprehended the way that Barack Obama campaigned. And I don't mean that negatively. Barack Obama had a brilliant campaign organization.
In the second debate, when and I forget who was the moderator, said that he was lying. Yeah. I was there.
Yeah, she's not there any longer.
Sununu's face turn. Steam was coming out of his ears.
I want to say that I was I went to one of those, and I think it might have been that one.
On Long Island?
No, it wasn't though. No,
that one was at Hofstra.
That's right. I didn't go to that one. I can't.
My son went there, and afterwards I went out for drinks.
I don't remember her name, but yeah, she was a CNN anchor. She's no longer Crowley. Yes, Kendi Crowley. Is she even in the business any longer? Because I have
no idea.
She got pretty harshly criticized even within her own industry over trying to introduce a fact check as a moderator. So yeah, at any rate, I think Mitt would have made a good president. I think the reason why people are uncomfortable with Mitt is because Mitt just seems to want to be. I think he's fairly conservative, especially in issues like life, and also fiscal. I think he's also fiscal conservative. He's not a big social conservative, though, and I think he is somebody who is just sort of pandering to, to people who aren't on his own team, and I think people just don't see him as one of them. I think they see him as an elite, and I think that's really. I actually think that that's really the biggest problem with this, is that Mitt Romney comes across as, an elite, and this is a party that doesn't particularly like elites.
I think it's a country that
would not
doesn't
be
really like.
That would not be Manchin's problem, though. Manchin does not come across as an elite. Manchin comes across as a blue collar kind of guy. Now Manchin's got money, but he comes across as a blue collar kind of guy, and I think he would be culturally, he would assimilate culturally easier into the GOP than maybe Mitt Romney.
Well, remember what's going on between AOC and Nancy Pelosi about making too much money from stocks that are related to congressional thing. I told Peter Schweitzer yesterday that he should re-release his book about that, because it's ridiculous how much money she's made by knowing what's going to happen. Right. If it was you or I, we'd be in jail.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they don't want to give up their privileges.
And the federal jails have lousy kosher food.
I wouldn't know.
Well, I wouldn't know either, but that's what I've heard. Okay, listen, I got to ask you another question, because tomorrow's Christmas Eve. Yep. Everybody talks about their favorite movies, and we all know that you think It's a Wonderful Life is an Easter movie.
Yep.
And I think Die Hard is a Hanukkah movie. All the best Christmas songs were written by Jews.
That's true.
So let's skip all that stuff. What is the best Christmas episode of a TV show?
Yeah, that's a tough question. If you had just said holiday episode, I would have said hands down, it's the Cheers Thanksgiving episode, the one that had the food fight, because that was everything that's great about Cheers is in that episode. But that's not a Christmas episode. That's Thanksgiving episode. And I'm really kind of struggling with this. I actually tried to look up some Christmas episodes from sitcoms. And I mean, I don't really recall any really great Christmas episodes. I just don't. I'm
torn between two.
Okay, let's discuss yours.
The Odd Couple, when he got the telegram from his wife. Good. Oscar got a good Christmas to you, Oscar dear. My alimony's due. If you don't get it to me soon, I'll throw the cops on you. That one. Because it's just so fun.
I remember that, but I love The Odd Couple, the series and the movie.
Right. But the other thing is, which a lot of people don't like, one of my favorite sitcoms was Married with Children. And Married with Children did a two-parter called It's a Wonderful Life, that is a satire on It's a Wonderful Life, where Al says, I wish I never was alive. And the ghost, and the angel was Sam Kinison, which, if you don't know Sam Kinison, he was a comedian who yelled everything.
Right.
And it was just so funny. Matter of fact, every year I look for it to be repeated. And so does my brother. And I'll call him and tell him, okay, it's on tomorrow on TBS, or he'll call me, just because I love it so much.
Sure. Yeah.
You got nothing?
I've got nothing on that. I didn't watch a whole lot of Married with Children. At the time, I had a son that was, I think, being a little unduly influenced by it. So we sort of cut it off. And it was never one of my favorite shows anyway. I think I have a little bit more appreciation of it now than I did back then, but I don't recall the Christmas episode at all.
But
how about? Okay, go ahead.
Did you ever see the Star Wars Christmas special?
Yes. The
worst Christmas show ever.
B. Arthur being the bartender in the cantina. Oh my gosh, that is just scarring. I mean, if you haven't seen this thing, wasn't that Lola Falana did some sort of a dance thing in the middle of it or something?
It was so awful.
It was so bad. The whole thing was so bad. And for the most part, didn't even involve the principals from Star Wars. I mean, Harrison Ford had a cameo. I think Carrie Fisher did a cameo. Mark Hamill did a cameo. For the most part, it was outside people doing this. It was so bad. It was just so, almost redefines the term cheese in entertainment.
Didn't they make a demand that it never gets played again or something like that?
I think the rumor was that George Lucas had it locked up and he would not release it again. Because, it's under his banner. He had the rights.
But you can find it on the internet.
You can find it on the internet. I think that he's since allowed for it to be, out there. Because, I mean, honestly, I saw it on YouTube. And if Lucasfilm had an issue with that, they would have just told YouTube to pull it down. But I do recall that it was so difficult to find at one point that somebody actually sent me the file. I don't know how they got it. They actually sent me the file of the entire 2-hour Christmas special. So that's how I first watched it again. It was so difficult to find that people used to say it was a rumor. It was an urban legend. And I would tell them it wasn't an urban legend. I was 14 years old and I was watching that on television. I could tell you it was a real show. It was a really bad show.
If you ever need a good laugh, you got to watch it because it's
so
bad. It's funny.
It's the type of thing that you'd watch deliberately because you appreciate bad cinema and bad television in the same way that you would purposefully go out and seek Battlefield Earth
or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is one of my favorites.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes was intended to be tongue-in-cheek. Battlefield Earth was not intended to be tongue-in-cheek. It just is unintentional. It's the greatest unintentional comedy of the 1990s. And that's the same thing with the Star Wars Christmas special. Honestly, I even looked this up and there was a couple of intriguing I think it was Decider had a list of the 25 greatest sitcom Christmas episodes ever. There was a Brady Bunch episode that I kind of barely remember. There was an Andy Griffith episode that I kind of do remember. Those were both good, but here's the problem with Christmas episodes on sitcoms, just structurally. And you've been in the entertainment industry, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about here. The problem is that good comedy is by its nature a bit cynical, a bit quirky, right? And Christmas is such a schmaltzy holiday. I mean, there's let me give you an example. Do you remember the movie The Lemon Drop Kid?
Yeah.
Okay. Bob Hope movie, really good movie. It's basically Bob Hope's version of Little Miss Marker, which has been made in different versions. And there's more music in The Lemon Drop Kid, but it's still the same story as Little Miss Marker. That's where the song Silver Bells comes from. Beautiful Christmas carol, right? Beautiful secular Christmas carol.
Right.
It's one of the ones that probably that the Jews wrote, as you were saying at the beginning of the episode, right? When you watch it in the film, though, it's really a cynical commentary on Christmas. It doesn't come across necessarily in the lyrics, but in the context of what Bob Hope is saying, it's sort of a cynical commentary on Christmas. You can't do that in a sitcom really effectively. You have to kind of give into the schmaltz. And so
some of the movies have it, though. Did you ever see Ted?
Yes, I did see Ted.
The beginning of the Ted is the day after Christmas, Christmas Day, where all the kids go out and have fun. They go out and beat up all the Jewish kids.
Yeah. Well,
it's cynical.
One of the most beloved Christmas movies is A Christmas Story.
Breaking news. Kim Potter found guilty.
Yep. 1st and 2nd degree manslaughter. I see that. I think that's probably correct. I mean, I don't see any reason why. I assumed when it happened, she was going to be found guilty of some level of manslaughter. When you're a police officer, you have to know which weapon you're drawing, and you have to be aware of these things. And she wasn't. She was grossly negligent, which is, you know, and as she
She could
admitted
have
on
had the same result if she passed gas. They would have passed out.
yeah, I mean, it's just I don't see this as a big surprise. I think that is a well-reasoned verdict. I don't see any reason not to accept that as a well-reasoned verdict. Anyway, to finish this up, Christmas Story is basically a cynical commentary on consumerism at a certain level, right? It's a cynical commentary on consumerism. It's just very fun, and it's sort of an innocent cynicism, right? You know, the only thing he's worried about is getting this Red Ryder BB gun, because, you know, that's what, you know, the toy of the day is. And that's fine. It's great. It's very charming. And it's, like I said, even that kind of cynicism is sort of an innocent cynicism, but it's hard to do that in the context of a pre-existing cast of characters that are relating to an audience in this sort of satirical, comedic sense. And then suddenly you got to put them into a situation with Christmas and it's schmaltzy. And at some point you have to service the schmaltz.
Plus, you have a fine line, because you don't want to cross the line where someone who celebrates Christmas thinks that you're being blasphemous.
Yeah, it's the reason why most of those things deal with the secular aspects of Christmas anyway. But I mean, even with that, even conceding that, I don't think that you could get a good sitcom episode that really addresses Christmas as the cultural phenomenon it is. And even the Cheers episode that I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's Thanksgiving, so it's a little less emotionally fraught anyway. But I mean,
that's the day where you eat turkey and watch football, right?
That's the day we eat turkey and watch football. So the Cheers episode, they just turn everything on its head, and it's, you know, all the different quirks that they regularly feature in there play into what happens on this Thanksgiving day, and it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious.
Well, we gotta start wrapping up. What do you have coming up at Hot Air? Hotair.com, folks.
Hotair.com. You know, we're going to be busy all throughout the holidays. We don't take days off. I mean, we'll probably take Christmas Day off, but otherwise we're going to be working, and you know, slower pace, but still working. So we'll be covering all of the hot topics. I've got.
Well, why should Allah take a day off? Isn't he Jewish?
Well, no, he's. Oh,
I thought he was.
He's openly atheist.
Ah, okay, but he was born Jewish.
I don't know about that. I actually don't know.
If he's an atheist, then he doesn't have to take off for Christmas.
Yeah, but it's a company holiday. You can't make the guy work. If he wants to, that's one thing, right? I mean, I might write a post or two on Christmas Day just because it's, you know, why not? You know, but
I'm taking off. It's a Saturday.
Actually, we have the Fridays and Mondays off technically as company holidays too, but we'll be working Fridays and Mondays throughout this.
When I worked for Disney, we got none of them off, because if they gave us off, they had to give all the people in the parks time and a half.
Yep.
So if you're not reading Hot Air, you should. But also, Tuesday and Thursdays at 3:00, 4:00 New York time, is the Ed Morrissey show, which I have so much fun listening to. And
being on from time to time.
Well, yeah, being on. And then Wednesday, you have to be a VIP, okay? And you should be a VIP in Salem, which actually their theme song is do 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 do. It's
the Star Wars Christmas special,
right? But again, it's so much fun because you interact with them that you got to be a part of. And Wednesday nights, but next week it's Thursday, he's in the universe on the after show with Dwayne Patterson, who again, it's just, guys, you got to follow this stuff because it's just so much fun. Oh, man, and if you haven't read this, okay, it says Ed Morrissey, but I really wrote it.
Shh. Nobody's supposed to know that, Jeff.
People, they're family.
Nobody's supposed to know that. I got a bunch of copies of your book up behind me too, you see.
That's true. We got a lot of copies. I hope you paid for them all.
Actually, yes. When it went to remainder, I bought quite a few of them.
Anyway, to everybody watching, listening on one of the podcasts, please have a joyous Christmas and a very happy New Year. And if you want to make a New Year's resolution, I got a suggestion. I don't care which party you are from or whatever, but make the resolution that if one of your congressmen, senators, or whatever supports a program you don't like, you'll write them a letter, and you'll do it. You don't curse them out because they'll throw it away right away, but you do it logically. And that will make everybody in the country much better, so they know what we're thinking. Because I got to tell you, I wouldn't want to be in the Congress right now going home for Christmas, because they're going to hear some stuff.
Yep.
And if you also have time, come to my site, LidBlog.com. I have an interesting post that relates American politics today to the book of Exodus.
Yes.
And
very good post.
And what you would call it, but I don't split the Red Sea. I do that in my bathroom sometimes, in the shower. But anyway, everybody have a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year. Thanks, Ed. Goodbye, everybody.